So I'm from India, that like she must have introduced, and I just heard the introductions. Few of them had listened to me on my thoughts last evening, uh, so they know what kind of information I have to pass. But I've listened to all of you, and all of you come from some different backgrounds, different age groups, and you have been seeking certain things to for self improvement. Maybe in the energy channels, someone is looking for some therapeutic benefits, and someone is just looking to improve upon their health and understand how to be independent. For me, I don't give generally lectures or presentations, so my talks are generally based on my own experiences as a doctor, as a traveler through this ancient lands of India where these practices were done, and few teachings from my own teacher, especially in women health, who was a, in our Indian terms we call them as an yogini, who used to practice this breath work for their own transcendence. So I would be sharing some technical aspects because I generally believe in logical aspects of how exactly things go about, what exactly it means, or what exactly we mean by women power, feminine power, how exactly it manifests, what exactly are the processes that might have gone into harnessing this power, how exactly it means in health and consciousness wise. And after this introduction, definitely, you can ask me your questions and I'll respond to it, which will, we can go deeper into the subject. So, uh, as far as the breathwork practices or women-based practices go, these practices are not documented. Whatever yoga practices we see nowadays around the world are male-based practices which are based on celibacy, which are based on a particular diet patterns, and eventually, they are adjusted or a little bit modified for the women's physiology. But they are not actually women-based practices. The thought process behind is that because for the most part of the previous 3, 4, 5 centuries, these yoga practices were dominated by males. But as far as our researches go, or as far as my teachings go, these practices were started by women. As I was discussing yesterday, the whole concept of this practice is based on understanding how life evolved. How life evolved, how exact is there anything beyond this mortal life? Is there anything beyond this mortal life? And how exactly can we connect to the higher consciousness? So the women practitioners at that time came to know that, as they enter puberty, as they get their menstrual cycles and they go through their menstrual cycles every month, year upon year, there is a certain amount of aging which is seen into their body. Slowly but surely, their skin starts sagging. They become weak. The bones start becoming weak, and they could see an apparent connection to the way these menstrual cycles used to occur because it was happening every month. It was coinciding with the moon cycles, so they could observe it. They also found out that with these menstrual cycles, in whatever society they remained, came attachments with respect to their children, with respect to their lovers, with respect to their husbands, and these emotions were modified. These emotions were modified into a sense so that the other partner could be gratified, the other partner could feel good, and it also led a lot of what we could call an equivalent word called stress on their own bodies. The third things also they observed is that once they born a child, once they have a child, it showed some physical aspects, physical changes on their body. The skin used to sag, the breast used to sag. They used to feel an emotional connect or disconnect as these children grew. And they thought that if this cycle, this way, this menstrual channel could be voluntarily controlled, then probably we could stop this aging process, or maybe we could reach to certain higher channels in the body. So this is how the first foundations of these women-based practices were laid down. The first thing they came to know is that during this menstrual flow, there is a certain amount of breath which goes on. They tried to understand how this breath flowed, how it connected to the flow of the menses. It could be the right nostril, it could be the left nostrils. There are certain technical aspects which they started understanding, and they started experimenting with this breath flow. Second point, they came to know that after the menses, it has a cycle that when it flows very fast, there comes a time when it ceases to exist. And after a particular time, there is an increased amount of awareness in the body to mate with someone. Maybe this is the point where something called as the egg, it becomes mature. So this is the second point where certain changes are happening into the body. So they started becoming aware of that. The third point came, how can we voluntarily control it. They came to know that during certain point of menses, the blood which flows out, it might be using more resources than required for. Because a lot of times they came to know that if they fell ill during a particular time, the menses used to go little bit ahead. Like we see nowadays, if you get fever, if you go from a particular long trip, sometimes the menses go ahead, sometimes the menses do not come on time. So they started understanding that this menses use certain resources in the body. How can we control these resources? How can we see that in a minimal amount of resources spent, this process can take over whatever the toxins that have to be going out through the body. The second option they understood is that each month that egg is formed is not fertilized. Each month whenever the egg is formed, we are not conceiving. So how can we reduce these resources so that minimum resources, the best quality egg is formed, or maybe the best quality egg is only formed when we need to conceive. The third option, they came to know that progeny was not in their hands. Means if they used to enjoy a sexual encounter with someone, it was most likely that they would end up being pregnant, because in those times contraceptives were not there. So how can we prevent this? Is there a way where we can prevent this pregnancy voluntarily? Can we prevent the seed from fertilizing from the egg? Is there a way to do it? That also things they started contemplating. And through this, they started using things around them. They started thinking about breath work. They started thinking about herbs. They started thinking about alchemy, which can be related to mercury, which can be related to base metals like gold, silver, internal usage, external usage, and this all they started contemplating. Third options, they were very much aware of the vibratory nature of sound, because generally in the education system it is said, because the Indian culture exists on a language what we call as Sanskrit. So it consists of 53 syllables. So these 53 syllables, anyone in the world uses them. There is nothing in this universe which cannot be identified with beyond these 53 syllables. So they understood these 53 syllables, what they called as matrikas. If they use it in a vibratory manner, they can influence certain hormonal channels in the body. They can influence certain secretions. So those were another things which they started understanding. Third things they started understanding is the use of certain holographic diagrams, certain what we call as yantras. They understood that if the breaths were controlled, if this sound syllables were mastered, then certain spatial diagrams which if were looked upon in a particular way, appear to certain parts of the brain. They are like fractals. Therefore, if you ever seen a yantra, if anyone has come across it, or mandalas what we call, which are like a little bit second generation iterations of the Buddhist terms, but in the earlier parts they were only yantras. They are complicated structures, but they are not complicated structures for us to understand. They are structures for one to focus. So when you gain those higher levels of consciousness, they appear in fractals. They appear in a three-dimensional space in your mind, which can alter the hormonal secretions. So this all forces they started becoming aware, because they used to study in that form. It was a matrilineal society. Of course, at that time, I won't call the country India, because India did not have any borders that time. Let us call it the subcontinent where this thing started happening. The Vedic culture started happening, and the pre-Vedic culture started happening, which was the basis of all these documentations. So we don't know who they were. A lot of people say they might be aliens. We don't know. A lot of people say they might have 12-strand DNA. We have 2-strand DNA. But we already know there were some very highly intelligent beings who documented certain fundamentals of the universe, which were applicable anywhere where life can be found. Now, life as we see, when we look for life, we look for life in terms of carbon. We look for life, intelligent life, in terms of what we understand as life. We think of carbon-based elements, but you can go to Saturn tomorrow and there can be life, but which is not perceptible by us. Because when we think of life, we think of someone which is moving, which is eating, which is excreting, which has some kind of an emotions, or maybe not emotions, but it might be beyond it. So this all things and all fundamentals were curtailed. People, those rishis or those sages who laid these foundations, they try to understand all this whatever metaphysics is there on fundamental levels. And so they understood that this universe has a specific pattern in which it grows, in which it stabilizes, in which it destructs itself. Similarly, the human life, it grows in a particular form, it stabilizes itself, it destructs itself. It is not a coincidence that a blind child is born in a perfectly normal parents, or a crook is born in house of a extremely rich parents with all the facilities. We see it in day-to-day life. So there is some pattern behind it. There is some reason why these things happen. And these things they understood in form of seeds, or what in today's world we call as karmas. That you are born with certain factors which you have to enlive in this circle. So, and we don't have any voluntary control over it. So at that time, these practices and this knowledge was used to create a system where we can get out of this involuntary circle of life and death. Is there a system where we can get out of this involuntary circle of life and death? So how can we get out? First, as they understood that there are 5 levels of existence. The first level of existence, as we say, are inanimate objects like mountains, like soil, which we don't see them growing, but from our logic we understand that they must be created sometimes, they will be destroyed sometimes. Like we say that first time there was no solar system, it was created, maybe it will be destroyed. The second level of existence they understood in terms of things which have certain kind of mass, but they grow towards the sun, they don't show any emotions, like plants. So some say that plants show emotions, but it is not perceptible by normal humans. Some people who study it, they say that we can understand, but we cannot see it. Normal humans cannot see it. Then the third level of existence comes in animals, where we can see them growing, we can see them hunting for food. And secondly, we can see a level of emotions in them, like a calf and a cow. If you take a calf away from the cow, she shows some emotions. If you take a baby cub away from the mother, she shows some emotions, but they are very rational emotions. There is no kind of understanding of when to show anger, when to manipulate anger. It is pure emotions. If she is angry, she'll attack. If she is not angry, she won't attack. Then comes a level of existence what we call as intelligent life, where we manipulate our emotions. If we are angry, we won't show it because we manipulate it. If you want to show anger to a loved one, it will be in a curtailed anger. If you want to show anger to a person whom we are not concerned with, it will be full-blown anger. So we manipulate. So we have an ability to understand these emotions, and that's what keeps us entailed in this life cycle. So to transcend this life cycle, we have to understand that we are an energy trapped in the body which is decaying. The moment it is born, it is going towards death. Even if you create, some people say that we have never fallen ill in our entire life. We have not even taken a pill. Yet we see them age. So we take it as natural because we know that as soon as we are born, we are going to age and die. But if we are healthy, we should not age, we should be static. So a body is decaying. It is made up of certain elements which we see in certain disorders have to be cut off. Like we see in diabetes, when gangrene occurs, we have to amputate the leg. So they are subject to destructions, they are subject to regeneration, but eventually they will die. And there is an clear perception that in a dead body and a living body, even if in spite of all the organs being present, the blood being present, in the dead body something ceases to move. That is the reason it is dead. It is cold. So there is something inside the body which animates the body. A dead body, even if you slap, abuse or care for it, it is showing no emotions. But same body, if it is life and you show this kind of an stimulus to it, it will react in a different way. So to your actions, it is reacting in a different way. So it is processing some information. So there is some energy which is making this inanimate body animate. So what is this energy? Sometimes it does in a voluntary way, sometimes it does it in an involuntary way. So can we gain complete voluntary control over it? So they understood that in the life's force, anything that moves has to come under a term what we called as Vayu. A lot of people call it as wind or perception of motion. So if we have complete control over this Vayu, what we call as Pran in Sanskrit, some people must have heard about this word. Yeah, Prana. So the control over it will give us voluntary control over each and every micro and macro secretion of the body, because without it nothing will go. If I have to secrete a digestive juice, it has to move. If I have to hit someone, my hand has to move. if something has to pass my ear and go to the brain, it has to move. The word you have to create, it has to move, it has to come from the belly. So everything which is expressed has to move. So if we have complete voluntary control over this, then we can transcend this body, then we can be freed of these emotions. And that was the basis of this yoga, because this control of this energy was called as pranayam. Ayam is control, voluntary control. And on this basis, different schools of meditations came. Some school of meditations went into a thought, basically divided into three, that we'll cut off all stimulus in life. We won't interact with any people, we won't interact with anyone, we'll isolate ourselves in closed doors, in a what you call as an extreme monastic order. Some class of people understood that no, we have to have voluntary control over it. So we have to participate in the system, we have to expose ourselves to the stimulus, we have to understand these emotions and create an expansive view towards these emotions, so that we hold nothing. And whatever is happening into our body, we need to have complete voluntary control. Like if you are angry, then we feel little bit different. Like you want to hit someone, something is happening into the brain. So we need complete control over it. We need to understand it. So that was another form of yoga which we call as Hatha Yoga. And there came a third point where people said that okay, we don't want to go the first rigid way where we want to create a no mind model. The second way is very difficult to understand because it involves lot of logic. So let us put our trust into someone who knows this path. So that was called as a devotional form of yoga, what we call as Bhakti Yoga. So these three forms of yoga are only there, of which all the sockets, whatever we see today in life, different, are based upon. So these women-based practices were the first practices of Hatha Yoga. They were the first one to reason that so much is happening into our body. Our body is going through so many changes. So there must be a way to understand it, because we have a common pointer each month that we are getting menses. After every menses, we are getting a stage in our body where the egg is formed. For the males, that common pointer was never there. We don't go through the cyclic changes, though we might be going it internally, but externally it is not aware. A common man is not aware of those changes. So they started understanding these practices. They started creating different kind of breath work. They started implementing linearity in their destroying linear aspects in their life. In terms of emotions, they understood that there are only 8 kind of emotions. In Sanskrit, these emotions are known as rasas. So they understood that there is an anger. This anger is not differentiated into a mother's anger towards a child or a man's anger towards a stranger. It is anger. It is one emotion. It processes in the same way. Only because of our thought processes, we express it in a different way. Then there is like longing for someone. We long for someone. When someone has gone away from us, we long. So it is not that you are longing more for your son and you are longing less for your husband. It is the same. Only we make it appear different. So there are certain changes which are happening into the body. So they understood this in these 8 basic forms. And they said that if we have a very open attitude in understanding these emotions, the stimulus doesn't matter. If someone makes me angry, even if it is a child, a stranger or a person, I enjoy that emotion. Then I am not acting on that behalf. I am not creating another world around me. I am not participating into another world around me. Like for example, if I don't enjoy the anger, if somebody makes me angry, I want to justify that I am right, you are wrong. So you indulge in some kind of a verbal duel or maybe some kind of an altercation. So you are creating a new system with that person inside it. So your thought process becomes linear because you are not expanding. You are validating certain things which are anyways going to perish. That is not required. Anytime if you see any reason for anger, we fight on things which are perishable. But we only fight because we feel we are wronged in that time-space quantum. So they said, can we transcend this? Only when we transcend this, and in each and every moment of our life, whatever stimulus comes to us in whatever forms, we only understand these 8 emotions. Then we are getting the maximum of our secretions. We are understanding it. Once this stage is reached, then we have got complete control over our energies. We have got complete control of our hormones. When we have complete control of our hormones, then we can get complete control of our reproductive seed. because it is based on this hormones. Lot of time when we see that, when people are stressed nowadays, we see that in certain women prolactin levels go up, estrogen levels go up. The seed is not secreted. You have to take fertility treatments, you have to take birth control pills. So when we have complete control over this, only then we have complete control over the secretion of the seed, the maturity of the seed. So second part. The third part, they said that with our breathing practices, with our bandhas, whatever we say, when we have complete control over these secretions, during an act of union with whomsoever it is, if the seed is shed within us, we have the power to prevent its journey towards the seed. Or with higher consciousness, we can select which is the best seed, the best possible seed to generate the best possible progeny, which is documented in history, has been done a lot of times. So this was, and the fourth process was that seems to be a central channel in the body. Whenever, like when women go through certain intercourse patterns, which we have seen, first time, if the intercourse is of the highest order, they suddenly get this shooting pain in the head. They feel like, it's a hangover after they have drunk like, 2-3 bottles of liquor. So that is actually that central energy which is hit. Sometimes, most of the times it gets hit involuntarily. So there is this central energy channel which is connecting directly to the higher centers of the brain. So if we can move this seed energy into this central energy, into this central path, which is not something like a path which we imagine. It is an anatomical and physiological path. It is a plexus. It is this plexus of nerves. When you can voluntarily make the secretions on your own. Then we enter to certain realms of the brain, certain higher centers of the brain, where we can get completely detached from the body. We understand that this body is going to die. We transcend the body. So you get a death-like experience where you're nowhere concerned. Now that is a point which I might not be able to explain because it is very individual specific. But let us say, for argument's sake, that we reach this kind of a point. So in these practices were started. When women started completely mastering these techniques, they understood that without the male experience, it was incomplete. Because they wanted the male energy or the male form to complete the experiences. Because the seed is absorbed through the male. So they understood that, like, if we can generate to the highest state like this, let us say if my partner also generates to that highest point of his evolution, he also develops this energy basis where he can control his seeds, where he can control what kind of a seed he can throw, then the experience, the conjugal experience will be complete. Then we can understand creation in complete form, because in creation there are two parts. In a woman, the creation occurs inside her body. In a male, the creation occurs outside his body. So that completion should be there. So they started teaching this to the male parts, of how to use these locks, how to use these bandhas to be celibate, how to have an orgasm without shedding your seed. And this slowly but surely formed the basis of Hatha-Yoga practices. Eventually what happened after that, the subcontinent got raided by a lot of influences from the West, raiders from the West, which were male dominated societies. So that is the reason this female based practices slowly but surely got very secretive or got destroyed, and this male based practices started coming to the fore. When the male based practices started coming to the fore, eventually most of them tamed it to their own liking. So they brought the aspect of celibacy, they brought the aspect of male dominance. And eventually these practices came into the modern world, where now till the earliest 19th century, the practices whatever you people do now were only restricted to the males, because it was clearly said in those books that because the female doesn't have control over a seed, she sheds every month, she will not transcend. Actually it is a metaphor. A lot of people take it as a misogynist sentence, but it is said that there are these practices where you can control your seed, but because it is not available, you are unable to control your seed. So you will be unable to transcend to higher heights. So these practices are not for you. You should not be doing these practices. So for most parts, yogic practices were misogynist. If you see the early Buddhist practices, what we called as Theravada, where it was said that women were not even allowed in Buddhism, in the higher ranks. Then came Mahayana, where certain women were allowed. And after that, some monks went over to the northeast of India, where they learned these practices from few remaining women, and the Vajrayana part started, which went to Tibetan Buddhism, then it went to Zen, and somehow now it has come back in different forms to the world. So this is how all these practices are based on. So that is the basis of these women based practices, that by doing certain practices common to your physiology, you can control your menstrual cycles. By controlling the menstrual cycles, following a particular diet, maybe with the help of herbs, maybe the help of certain breath based exercises. Secondly, also, only these are like one part of it. Secondly, to create a essence in your life where you are reacting to emotions that come into your life in a very expansive way, not taking it personally, not understanding in one point of view in the way you have been born. You can create a sense in your body where this secretions come into your voluntary control, and eventually you transcend. So this is how this tantra practice is what we have learned, which we are trying to pass on in our clinical practices. When a lot of women used to come, I saw this pattern that a lot of women, young women, used to come with polycystic ovarian syndromes. They used to go with obesity. A lot of women used to get these breakouts. A lot of women are going into depressions. Suddenly if they don't get a particular job, they break down. If somebody leaves them, they break down. They are getting like, they cry at unnecessary situations. Suddenly there comes attack. So a lot of people diagnose it as panic attacks, high cortisol levels, low cortisol levels. A lot of women are getting these muscle pains, body pains, phantom pains. So as a practitioner, I always used to give medications and patterns to improve the menstrual cycles. And we used to see a complete reversals in 10 days, 12 days, where these women have been taking herbal medications for like 10 years, 15 years, different things. So that one thing was very apparent to me, what I learned, and when we put it into practice, that if a woman can completely take care of a menstrual cycle properly, understand the dynamics of her body, then she can add so much more to her health. She can become so much more aware of her body. In a woman, weight gain and weight loss has got nothing to do with diet and exercises. Only those women who are hormonally strong can lose weight with diet and exercise. Therefore, when I give treatments to a lot of women who inadvertently lose a lot of weight. So a lot of other women looking at those women come to me to say, okay, we want to do weight loss, but I say I don't give treatment for weight loss, because it is a wrong way to think. I can lose weight by diet and exercise, a woman cannot, because if her hormones are very bad, even if she goes on a fast for 50 days, she won't lose weight. In fact, she'll gain 1 kg. So that is how the body functions, because it has to create seed every month. Life has got nothing to do with emotional and financial problems. Each month it has to create an egg. In that egg, if fertilization occurs, it has to create food for the baby. If it not occurs, it has to throw away that egg and create a new egg. This goes on and on till you reach a point where there are no more eggs or very few eggs remaining, or maybe your body's resources are so depleted that they cannot create those eggs. That is the time you go into menopause. So if you can control these resources, if you can budget these resources well, there are two factors to it. One is the therapeutic factors, when women are not concerned with higher end yogic practices, they want to get complete control or transcend. They are just concerned with their health. So this is one part. If this certain things, certain points can be understood, they can remain healthy. And for women-based practices who really want to go into spiritual practices, who are looking at this yogic practices of breath work to transcend, then there is a caution, or there is this foundation which they should understand, that the practices should be done as per their physiology. If the practices are not done as per their physiology, then it can affect the thyroid hormone, it can affect the pituitary hormone, and it can cause lot of long-term problems in your body, because your body requires constant maintaining of temperature. Because let us say a snake's egg, for example, in India we have a snake species called as the king cobra. So its egg only hatches at 29 degrees. At 26 or 2030 it won't hatch. So it has to put the egg it has to sit on the egg and completely control. Similarly, in a woman's uterus, the eggs have a basal ovarian temperature. So during menses, lot of blood goes to the uterus so that it breaks open the endometrium. You shed. Eventually, after that, the temperature cuts down and it is monitored by your thyroid gland so that the optimum egg is formed. Now, therefore, during menses, in earlier times, it is said that if you run a lot, the blood supply gets cut from here, goes to the muscles. So the uterus becomes fat. Now, if you do a lot of heavy work during menses, fat. If you take a lot of stress, you're thinking, you're working, fats. And because of this, the eggs are not formed properly. Eventually, also when you do this breath work, if you're altering the hot and the cold channels of thyroid, then secondly, the blood supply to the egg gets cut off. eventually these are cumulative poisons. Within 2 years, 3 years, you'll start getting these problems. A lot of women will be exposed to polyps, fibroids, maybe, and this all things will be very apparent, which we see nowadays when a lot of women who come to us and they say we have been practicing this breath work for 5 years, 6 years, but now my joints are paining. So they think they are exerting too much, or they are doing too much of asanas, and therefore it is happening. But it happens because of the breath work. So this is what lies at the base of this knowledge which I share. Of course, a lot of time when I share this knowledge, the audience who is there have a particular base. They come from some higher technical aspects, or only concentrated on these high-end practices. So it becomes easy for me to delve on it, because I assume that they know this history. Or sometimes this lecture comes only to healthcare practitioners who are into providing these remedies. So I could curtail my work according to that, because this is a wide-based audience who come from different backgrounds. I just thought that maybe this kind of an introduction might help you. Now, whatever questions if you have, you can ask me. Maybe I can answer them, and it can help others also to understand it in a way which you people perceive it.
So when you're talking about the yoga, is that part of Kundalini yoga, when you're bringing the energies up to create? Is that what you're talking about?
See, as I said, that all the yoga, yin yoga, ashtanga yoga, whatever yoga is available in the world, which will be created, power yoga, vini yoga, only are formed on 3 patterns.
Right.
The first pattern is to create a no mind model.
Mm-hmm.
So in the no mind model, you want to completely isolate yourself from the stimulus. I don't want to indulge with you, so I'll give up food, I'll put up celibacy, I'll give up clothes, I'll give up everything, I'll retain myself into a mountain, I'll isolate myself, I'll use the breathing channels to control my senses, so that I don't want that stimulus to appear. And the second part of yoga is Hatha Yoga, where I understand that I want voluntary control over my body. So this Hatha Yoga, and every Hatha Yoga of this is developed on breath. You take from one nostril, you remove from the other nostril, you hold a breath for particular time. After exhalation, you hold a breath for particular time. That is basis of all yoga. And you employ some bandhas. Now, the variations in it, like someone will tell you that you hold it and you exhale very slowly. Or in certain yogas, you will say you will take a asana and you stretch it for a long period of time, as you do it in yin yoga. So, those are only the modifications which have been done.